there is a small, precise pop, the kind you forget until you hear it again. I pull a cork from a jar, and the air rushes out like a held breath. It smells of rain-damp wool and the kind of tobacco someone never quite quit. It smells like a winter my hands remember, but my mind cannot place. And then a voice, a single stunned syllable, a name, spoken as if it had been waiting just beneath the lid.
Find somewhere dark and quiet. Put your headphones on and listen closely now. I'm Samnang, and this is Nature's Dread. Tonight's story is called Locked Air. We'll follow a forager who uncovers a line of corked jars and moss, and a town that must decide what to do when scent becomes evidence or obsession. The forager's name, call them Mara, prefers the hours when the world is mostly moss and breath. Mara goes into the scrub to gather fiddleheads and mushrooms, to find the edible shapes the map ignores. The trail they use is unmarked, a place the town hardly notices. That quietness is the first thing I want you to smell in your mind. Wet earth, decaying leaves, the sharp tang of pine sap. It's a place where small absences show up easily. An empty boot, an extra cup on a porch, a hollow in the undergrowth that wasn't there yesterday.
One afternoon, clearing bramble with gloved hands, Mara's trowel hits a brittle cork. They dig, the dirt comes free in soft clumps, and there it is, a row of tiny jars, wrapped in linen, each with a tiny label, initials and a date, some recent, some older. The first jar is small enough to fit in 2 fingers. Mara uncorks it. Because you do, when you find things, you want to know. The air escapes like someone exhaling after a long-held secret. It smells like a damp coat left on a chair after a storm. And then the call. A woman in town, frantic, says the scent is her brother. Disappeared 3 winters ago.
That moment, someone recognizing a scent, turns everything from private curiosity to public story. More jars appear, letters taped to the lids. Dates line up in a pattern, summers and winters, names that stop mid-sentence, initials matched to missing persons lists, until the town's notice board looks like a map of absence. People begin to show up at Mara's door, relatives with faces carved thin by waiting, an archivist who wants to catalog the labels, a woman who says these jars smell of the coal stove her mother used to light each dawn. I spoke with an olfactory neuroscientist, names omitted here to protect privacy, who reminded me that scent is the most direct of all our chemical senses. Smell feeds information straight to the limbic system, the place where memory and emotion live arranged like a cluttered attic. A single whiff can retrieve a childhood bedroom, a lost lover's jacket, the exact brand of soap your grandfather used. That's why those jars felt so powerful. They aren't reincarnations of people. They are triggers, chemical keys that open particular drawers in the brain.
A forensic chemist told me about volatile organic compounds, VOCs, the molecules that carry scent. Some break down fast, others can bind to fabrics, to oils, to the tannins in cork and wood. Under certain cool anoxic conditions, traces can persist far longer than you'd expect. That doesn't mean the jar holds a living person. It means the jar can hold a chemical signature. Smoke from a fireplace, the lanolin scent of sheep's wool, the citrus note of a particular shampoo. A forensic lab can compare that signature to samples, but scent, like memory, arrives laced with subjective meaning.
An anthropologist I spoke with placed the jars in a longer human story. Around the world and across time, people have kept items that recall the dead: a lock of hair, a shawl, the scent on a pillow. Some cultures use scent deliberately in mourning, burning particular herbs, preserving cloth with oils, things meant to keep the presence of a person close. Those jars might be a private grief ritual, a practice of holding loss tightly enough to touch. Or they might be an archive, someone attempting to map what absence smells like, specimen by specimen.
Notice the silence here. People in town begin to argue. Scientists ask to sample the jars under controlled conditions. Families plead for privacy, for the jars to be returned untested. An ethics board is mentioned at one meeting. The county police knock on Mara's door. Some call what Mara found a miracle, a way to answer who. Some call it desecration. Mara, who only wanted to gather supper from the woods, finds themselves the steward of other people's grief. This is the moment the curiosity becomes a responsibility. This is the moment you cannot turn back.
And then there is the night. It begins like most nights in small towns, the lamplight through curtains, the slow exhale of wind over the river. Mara agrees, hesitantly, to open one jar for a family who have traveled 3 hours for the chance. They do it quietly in the kitchen. The jar is small, wrapped in linen, stained a little with time. Mara pries the cork loose. The air that comes out is thin and precise, a child's shampoo mixed with the metal hint of a pocket knife. The family inhales together. A man presses his palm to his mouth and speaks a detail he has never said aloud, a nickname, a silly routine. The room is a taut thing now. What began as recognition becomes a testimony.
That testimony shifts everything. The jar becomes evidence in the eyes of some. It becomes sacrament in the eyes of others. A town meeting follows, voices spilled and raw. A daughter demands the jar be returned unopened to her family. A researcher wants chain of custody rules, a lab seal, data. The local paper prints an editorial about intrusion and science and the right to remember in peace. The forager, Mara, stands in the doorway and realizes they are the only one who has held these objects from the ground. They must decide whether to hand them over, lock them away, or find another way to respect both sorrow and study. The climax of this story is not a shout, but a decision in low light. Mara walks into the workshop behind their house with one jar in hand, the last one they found, the one with no initials. It's heavier than it looks. Outside, the town sleeps, or pretends to. Mara loosens the cork. The smell that rises is not immediately familiar. A dry, metallic edge, a sweetness like fading fruit, something that reminds Mara of a field at dusk and of a voice they half remember from childhood. In that smell, a memory surfaces, an admission from Mara's own past, a detail that rewrites how they see their role. They can give the jars to the lab, give them back to families, or bury them again and keep their knowledge to themselves. The choice feels like a moral test. What is stewardship when artifacts pull on the raw wound of people's lives?
The aftermath is a town that splits in gentle, fierce ways. Some families choose to keep the jars in kitchen cabinets, opening them on anniversaries like people opening letters. A university publishes a cautious paper on scent preservation in humid soils. The county creates guidelines, permission, consent, transparent handling. Mara donates a number of jars to a community trust with strict rules. Some are sampled scientifically, others are returned sealed. The forager keeps one jar on a windowsill, small, corked, unlabeled, because not everything should be explained, and because some mysteries are kinder when preserved with a little distance.
Before we leave this story, consider the last image, a jar that smells of something unplaceable, neither memory nor lab match. It sits in the late light and catches dust on the lid. You could uncork it. You could say it's only old cloth and chemical traces. Or you could let it be a vessel for the feeling that some people keep when they can't let go, a tender, stubborn holding on to what the world has taken. Sometimes, the most honest memorial is silence around a thing we refuse to explain.
Are you still with me? I asked people in town what they feared most. Not the jars themselves, they said, but what would happen if someone decided grief was a public exhibit, if private sorrow became data. They worried about theft, about exploitation, about a market for memory. Those fears are real. So is the human need to touch what we have lost. There are no easy answers, only trade-offs: knowledge and consent, curiosity and respect.
If you're curious about the science, scent reaches back to memory through the olfactory bulb's close ties to hippocampus and amygdala. Chemically, preservation depends on temperature, exposure to oxygen, and the binding substrates: cloth, wax, oils. Anthropologically, scent has been a vessel of presence in rituals worldwide. I leave references and resources with the episode notes. If you want to dig deeper, you're welcome to. But please, do not disturb graves, private property, or memorials in pursuit of jars. Contact authorities or family members. Stewardship should always be an informed, respectful choice.
I won't romanticize the harm that public curiosity can do. Families told me about the ache of being asked to prove grief or to share it on camera. I also won't flatten the solace some found, the way opening a jar allowed a sibling to say a last name aloud, to close a door with a word. Complex human things rarely split cleanly into right and wrong. They are messy, and they hurt, and sometimes they heal in ways we can't measure.
In the end, Mara chooses a middle path: a community trust, strict consent forms, a small archive where families may request access with a counselor present. Scientists may study a few samples under agreed conditions. Some jars are returned sealed. Some are buried again, intentionally, by families who want the memory to remain a private thing. And the jar on Mara's windowsill, unlabeled and unresolved, remains corked. Some things, the town agrees in their own slow ways, are kinder left to sit in the light. If you're carrying loss tonight, small or vast, know this: smell does not lie, but interpretation does. Memory is shaped by longing, by what we need to remember. Objects can hold a key, but they do not hold the whole person. The jars teach us about the lengths we will go to keep someone close, and the weight that closeness can place on the living.
If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who listens in the dark. Subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, check the corners.